The Colts got their guy. Now what? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. I'm Jake Arthur, joined today by Andrew Moore. You know, the two of us from horseshoehuddle.com. Andrew also hosts the Horseshoe Huddle podcast along with Drake Wally. Thanks for filling in today for us, brother.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure joining you on Locked On, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, again, you guys have the Horseshoe Huddle podcast, but I really want to get your thoughts on the new Shane Steichen stuff. You haven't been on with us since all that went down, so that's obviously the main topic of today. But you know, just initially, what's your temperature gauge on this hire?
I mean, considering where this team was 3 months ago, and I kind of wrote about this, where we went from a press conference where we had the owner talking about sausage making and rocket science. The GM didn't want to even be in the room, and we had a coach that had never coached before preaching about accountability, yet he failed to hold himself accountable, to now the Colts possibly grabbing the best offensive mind of any of the candidates out there. So it's been a complete 180. It feels like the balance has been restored to the Indianapolis Colts, and I think Shane Steichen is a home run hire for the Colts. The search was extensive, but I think they came out with the right guy, a guy that is forward-thinking offensively, a guy that, while maybe he is not as far on the rah-rah scale as a Wink Martindale, you could tell from his press conference on Tuesday just how passionate he was and how fiery he is, and he's ready to get to work. And I think that's what Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard wanted to see out of their next head coach. Maybe not going a complete opposite of what Frank Reich was, but just someone that can hold players accountable and light a fire into this locker room. So I think on the onset, it looks great. I think Shane Steichen will excel here in Indy, but now it's time, like I've been saying, this is the most important offseason in 25 years for the Indianapolis Colts. They made one of their biggest decisions. Now it's time to make all the little decisions before the most important decision come April's draft.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Going from extreme lows to extreme highs. I mean, back in November, December, Zach and I were almost going back into our high school emo phases, you know, saying, you know, even if they don't hire, you know, even if it's not Jeff Saturday, they won't get this right. And then sure enough, they go out and get the shiny new toy that we said should be at the top of the list way back a couple months ago. So no, my biggest things are, you know, you're getting a guy who obviously has a great track record with quarterbacks, and he doesn't have a type. He's had success with pretty much every type of quarterback you can have. Even Gardner Minshew, people don't even talk about that. When Jalen Hurts went out for a little bit, Gardner Minshew picked up exactly, you know, I thought he looked perfectly fine in his appearances in both of the last couple of years. So that's great. And, you know, Steichen is very adaptable. You know, we've talked to some people who've studied Steichen for longer than the rest of us have been. And Steichen's very adaptable. He can do things on the fly. He's a great game planner, and he doesn't really get stuck in his way. So I'm really excited to see how he moves forward with the really talented personnel that the Colts do have, but maybe haven't really been able to showcase it. So on the rest of today's show, we're going to talk more about the Shane Steichen era Indianapolis Colts. They now have their head coach, but what comes next? We'll talk about some players that we think they should add for him this offseason that we would like to see play under his tutelage. Some of the coaches that we would like to see join his staff. But first, some of the Colts coaches who are maybe in limbo that we want to make sure that the Colts retain. So Andrew, first up, it's probably not a great secret that Gus Bradley and his staff, for the most part, are probably going to be back.
Mhm.
He's got strong ties to Shane Steichen from their days back with the Chargers. From everything I've heard, they had a great relationship. Most of that staff, I would think, should be back, especially Ron Milas, defensive backs coach. I would think, Mike Mitchell should be back. But is there anyone, any of the smaller assistants or anyone who you think might be in limbo, offensive or defensive side, that you want to make sure are back with the Colts?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about the defensive staff and special teams, I think most of those guys will return. And I thought it spoke volumes and kind of hinted at that when you talk about Gus Bradley and Bubba Ventrone both being on hand, sitting front row for Shane Steichen's introductory presser. If those guys weren't going to be there, or there was a sense they weren't going to be there, I don't think they would have even been there at the introductory press conference. So as far as guys that I think the Colts should hang on to, you're probably looking at mostly a new offensive staff, but I really think Reggie Wayne will be one of the holdovers. Number one, because I think he really did some good work with those wide receivers last year. You saw him come in with a mostly young group, and as those guys got related to the NFL team pretty quickly, and they were still creating, while it wasn't great separation, you saw them continually get better throughout the year. I think what spoke to kind of Reggie Wayne's work as well was these wide receivers showed up every day, and they were the same guys each and every day, regardless of which quarterback was throwing them the ball. And you might think from the outside, well, what does it matter what quarterback is throwing you the ball? But each quarterback is different. Each quarterback wants you to be in the same, or in a different spot when the ball comes out. Each quarterback wants you to run the route just a little bit differently. Those guys had to adjust all of that on the fly, and I think Reggie Wayne really did a good job with that, as far as getting those guys prepared, making sure that no matter what quarterback was under center, they were still going to go out there, do their job, and do their job well. So, and then Reggie Wayne is also under for the season. So Shane Steichen would actually really need to not want Reggie Wayne to be there to get him out. So I think as far as the coaches that have a chance to stay, I think it's got to be Reggie Wayne on that offensive side.
Yeah, that's definitely one I'm interested in as well. The Colts spent years trying to get Reggie to come on and be a part of that staff, and they finally got him. So yeah, Reggie Wayne is definitely one I want to see held over. His work with that young receiving core, like you said, it can't be understated. Alec Pierce, he probably could have even had a much better rookie season if not for the quarterback situation. His work specifically with Pierce was paramount. I remember talking to Pierce throughout the season during, after games, whatever, just asking about what they did to get him ready, and I think Reggie played a pretty big role in that. Someone else I just briefly mentioned before, Mike Mitchell, another former player, and his brief playing time with the Colts, just like a back half of a season, it was crazy how much, I think it was mainly coming from Frank Reich, was saying he just was a huge leader and got the best out of some of those young defensive backs. I mean, he was a player, but he was just as much of a coach, taught some guys how to watch film and how to do this and that. And he had a huge impact on some of those guys in just a brief time. And then the Colts wanted to bring him back as a coach. And I mean, look at the Colts safety group from last year. It was kind of a revolving door. They had some injuries, but they got some really good play. Kari Willis retires before the season. Julian Blackmon's coming back from an Achilles. Rodney McLeod gets in there. Nick Cross looked good early, but, they needed Rodney McLeod out there for his leadership as well. Rodney Thomas coming out of nowhere. Even Marcel Dabo, the German transplant, he kind of got up the depth chart quicker than I thought he would as well during summer. So I think those two former players have had a huge impact. I'm also wanting to see more of what Cato June has to offer. I just really like these former players. Now, I liked to watch those guys during training camp. I know you were out there as well. Reggie and Mike Mitchell were both really hands-on. I think Cato probably spent a lot of time learning from Rick Smith, who's been a longtime heralded linebackers coach. And so I'm really looking to see how much more hands-on he gets with the players this summer, and I guess during OTAs and things like that as well. So those are some guys who I think are rising stars in the coaching ranks who I would definitely like to see those guys back.
Yeah, it seems like with the position coaches, a lot of the guys that Gus Bradley brought over have been in the league for 20, 30 years, especially when you're talking about Richard Smith and Ron Miles. But then the main, like I guess a main position coach, the youngest on that staff was Nate Ollie. And
Mhm.
I mean, we kind of talked about it towards the end of last year, but the Colts defensive line, as far as getting after the quarterback, looked a lot better than they have in years. And they almost broke the franchise record for sacks in a season that was set back way back in 2005. And because of the chaos of that way the season ended, I mean, not a lot of people really thought about that. But I think Nate Ollie in this attacking front, you saw Kwity Paye and Dio Odangbo take huge leaps going into year two. And I think they can take another leap in year three as well. Not to mention those two big boys in the middle, in DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart. So I'd really love to see how Nate Ollie in his second year as the defensive line coach can really build upon what they did in that first season and how this pass rush for the Colts, which it was better in 2022, but I still think it needs to take another step up. We'll see if he can do that with this group.
Yeah, they could definitely get more consistent. That's for sure. Before we talk about some coaches that we would like to see brought in from the outside, let's hear from our sponsor, Built Bar. So we just got through the holidays, of course, and I know, like a lot of you, my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. Whether or not it works, we'll see. If you want to eat healthier like me, but you don't want to compromise on taste, then I've got just the thing for you. You have to try a Built Bar. With Built, healthy's actually tasty. Seriously, they're actually delicious, and you won't even think that they're good for you. It's perfect for your New Year's resolution. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste just like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that, again, they're healthy. Just 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar, meanwhile having a whopping 17 grams of protein. So head to your nearest Walmart or Sam's Club to buy a box. You can thank us later. All right, Andrew. So the Horseshoe Huddle group has really been hitting it hard lately with figuring out who on this coaching staff, who's coming in. So some of the most, they really need kind of a whole offensive staff, offensive coordinator paramount. Shane Steichen is going to be the play caller, but you need that right-hand man to help game plan throughout the week and kind of teach, the guys under him. Steichen is going to have his plate a little more full now, obviously. So offensive coordinators out there, Zach has talked a lot about how they need to nail this offensive line hire. And last, we'll get to we probably can't get into it real specifically because it's not a real sexy position where a lot of names, but the tight end coach hires is one we'll want to see as well. So as far as offensive coordinator goes, are there any names out there really ringing a bell?
Yeah, and I know Zach is all on the Pep Hamilton train as far as offensive coordinator, and a lot of Colts fans might not as excited to see Pep Hamilton because things didn't end well the last time he was. I think he brings a different feel to the offensive coordinator position for this regime. I'd like to see him as offensive coordinator. I don't know. I think Pep Hamilton would fit probably better as a quarterback coach for this team. But in my opinion, the offensive coordinator that has really caught my eye when looking at Shane Steichen and what do with this coaching staff is Kevin Patullo. And Kevin Patullo was the pass coordinator Eagles I think last season, as far as he was a wide receiver coach with the Colts from 2018 to 2020. So Chris Ballard and this team already have a familiarity with Kevin Patullo. He's a guy that maybe isn't as, at least when you see him in press conferences or when talking to him, he's more of the Frank Reich approach, I would say, not as fiery as Shane Steichen, so it can kind of balance out the two. He's still he's got a great football mind. He did wonders with that wide receiver group while he was here in Indy. I think he has just to really excel in whatever he has been since he left Indy and was with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I've a favorite on it as offensive coordinator. From my standpoint, it would probably be Kevin Patullo.
I'd agree. If putting the gun to my head, who's it going to be? I'd say Patullo as well. It just seems to fit. Another young rising offensive mind, along with Steichen, was just there in Philly with him. Has been in Indy, so it's not a huge leap. He's already very familiar. Like you said, he did really good work here with some of those guys. So I always liked watching him. I thought he interacted with players well, and again, thought he got some productive play out of those guys given the circumstances. Another guy I'll add in there who Shad McGinnis really kind of turned me on to is Anthony Lynn. Now, as a play caller throughout his career, he's taken some shots, but as a non-play calling offensive coordinator and like a run game coordinator specifically, this guy is as good as it gets around the league, and his resume really does speak for itself. I think back to his Buffalo days, I think it was, when he was really productive and got a lot out of that group. And, if marrying that offensive line in the run game again is something I think has to happen. Like, we saw how special it can be just a couple years ago when Jonathan Taylor had one of the best seasons for a running back in franchise history, and then just everything went down the tank last year. It's important to get those groups working together, and having an experienced guy like Anthony Lynn who can focus on that and not have to be the play caller and everything. I think that would be an intriguing get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that could be missed about Anthony Lynn is, we think about how it didn't end well with the and when he was in Detroit in 2021, their offense kind of Anthony Lynn spent the 2020 season in San Diego under Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle Shanahan is probably hardiest running offense in the entire NFL. He makes running look fun. I know Colts fans love to say run the damn ball, but when you're actually running the football with the 49ers, it looks like the Red Sea is parting. So him being able to pick Kyle Shanahan's brain, be in that offense, kind of see how the 49ers can use their running game. If he could bring that over to Indianapolis with Jonathan Taylor running behind Quentin Nelson and that offensive line as resurrect and get back to the status that they were, while Shane Steichen tries to tailor the offense to quarterback and what is going to succeed for a rookie, Lincoln have that in the run, kind of take some things off Steichen's plate, which is, in all seriousness, that's a lot of what this staff does under a head coach. Take things off the head coach's so the head coach can focus on more of the big picture items, the game planning kind of things in that nature.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously the offensive line hire is a big one. So some of the popular ones that we've talked about on the site and on the pod lately, Roy Esteban, who is the Eagles assistant offensive line coach behind Jeff Stoutland, and then former Texans offensive line coach George Warhop. Those are a couple intriguing names. But one guy whose hat I want to throw into the ring is Harry Hiestand. He is the former Notre Dame and former Chicago Bears offensive line coach, was with the Bears twice. When he was with Notre Dame, that's when they were cranking out offensive pro talent on the offensive line. Quentin Nelson, Zach Martin, Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, all those guys. Harry Hiestand was their coach. And Quentin holds him in high regard. I remember there was kind of a big to-do about Hiestand going to the Bears after Quentin got to the NFL and eventually getting to play together again. Well, Hiestand is out at Notre Dame now. So as far as I know, he's a free agent and he's available. So that's a name I'm kind of intrigued to put out there. I'd be very interested in that. Like, if you have a chance to bring a highly accomplished offensive line coach who has coached in the NFL and happens to have mentored your potential future Hall of Fame left guard, I say do it. Like, he at least should be in the running, I think. I don't. Have you heard any other offensive line coach names buzzing out there?
Besides the ones that we've already mentioned, I haven't. There's a lot of buzz around Istvan, especially because of his work under Stoutland, and then being with Steichen. But I think for this offensive line position, I do think that they need to get somebody with a lot of experience, and I think for many of these positions, because when you look at Shane Steichen, yes, he's coached in the NFL for 12 years, but he's only 37 years old. He's 6 days older than Matt Ryan, so he is going to be learning on the fly of how to be a head coach. It's a completely different game and a completely different element than just being an offensive coordinator or a quarterbacks coach. So you want to have guys that have been there for a long time. And you're talking about Istvan, who while he's only been in the NFL since 2019, he has 33 years of coaching experience. That matters. That really does matter. I would assume that he is obviously probably the favorite, and I'm sure Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay will try to do whatever it takes to find an offensive line coach that they think is going to get this group to ascend back to the level it was just a couple years ago. But I mean, when you're bringing in the college coach of your future Hall of Fame left guard, and you know that the demeanor that those guys coming out of Notre Dame that you mentioned have when they get to the NFL, they play through the whistle. They're always dedicated, and they're obsessed with working on their technique. I mean, that's instilled from them when they get to Notre Dame, and I think that will rub off on some of the other linemen that honestly probably need a culture change if the Colts offensive line wants to get back to where they were back in 2018 and 2019.
Yeah, for sure. And you guys might be saying, wait a minute, the Colts have an offensive line coach, but Chris Strasser is reportedly the favorite to go and replace Warhop in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not he does that, he may not be back regardless, because he was kind of the position coach with the biggest target on his back throughout the season. And then last, I mentioned that I'd like to see the Colts really nail the tight end hire. I don't have any names because, the ones I searched for are long established guys who probably aren't getting pulled off their post with the teams they're at. But the reason being, I thought the tight ends were criminally underused last year, especially compared to how we've seen them before under Frank Reich. I mean, imagine Jelani Woods used to his full potential. Kylan Granson, I thought, was underused. Mo Alley Cox, I think, has more to him than was used. If his blocking is going to be lacking, then he has shown that he can be a downfield threat. And he always seems to be able to rack up huge yards after the catch somehow. He's not even the fastest guy in the world. But if you're keeping him around, I think there are probably better ways to use them just as a blocker. And then Drew Ogletree, we saw in a brief glimpse during the preseason and training camp that guy might be pretty special, coming off an ACL, and he's a little older, so it's tough there. But I really want to see a really good tight end coach.
Yeah, I think the tight ends were greatly underutilized last year, and I think with coming into year two, you usually see tight ends one of those positions that it takes a couple years for guys to get acclimated to the NFL game. We already saw what Jelani Woods can do, but Drew Ogletree hasn't played a snap yet in the NFL yet. When you and I were there on the sidelines of training camp, he was catching 3 to 4 balls, and it seemed like you couldn't keep him out of the end zone. So that's going to be really fun to watch. Kylan Granson, I think the Colts still haven't found the right way to use him. I mean, 2 years now, kid still doesn't have a touchdown, but it seems like he's always pretty wide open. So there's just different avenues that they can do. And then of course, quarterback coach, when they're bringing in a rookie quarterback, I mentioned Pep Hamilton. And then there's rumblings that Phillip Rivers could be even an option there as the quarterback coach because of how close Shane Steichen is with old Uncle Phil. So it's going to be interesting to see the staff that Steichen can assimilate, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where obviously the Colts need the most work.
That last one's intriguing because, I mean, we know that the Colts will hire former players who only have high school coaching experience. So Philip did go coach his son. So I'm just saying. But the Colts are going to have some interesting offseason prop bets, I'm sure. New head coach, quarterback coming in. And for that, we recommend that you guys make your bets with FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So do not miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Andrew. So Shane Steichen said it the other day. It's all about the players. It's what we get most excited for. Who, now that we know who the Colts head coach is, we obviously, quarterback has been the other biggest source of discourse online. Who are some players, not just quarterbacks, but, through free agency and the draft, that you really just want to see play under Shane Steichen this offseason?
Yeah, and I think when you're thinking about that question, you immediately go to, well, who was on the Eagles offense last year that could be brought over? And I think when you're talking about a guy that could be a possible bridge quarterback, you think Gardner Minshew. And I think it'd be a great fit. I mean, the guy's a free agent. He's a guy that, even though you think he might not be a top level starter. I mean, I think in his career, he's got 44 touchdowns and 13 or 17 interceptions, somewhere around there. So you think of Gardner Minshew, that might kind of surprise you a bit, but I think, and then you want to think about the offensive line. Isaac Samola, a guard that has played very well with the Philadelphia Eagles, I think could come in and probably start day one at right guard. So you're probably going to want to think of guys on the offensive side of the ball, but there's guys out there on defense that might want to look for a fresh start with the Colts as well, if they're coming over from the Eagles, or even guys that are coming over from the Los Angeles Chargers, where Shane Steichen spent multiple years. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Colts do, especially when we get to free agency, because there's a quote that stands out to me about Chris Ballard when he was talking at his end of season press conference. I forget who asked the question, but they asked, do you need to reevaluate your what you've done in the past? And Chris Ballard said, it's something that I definitely need to learn from, and I definitely need to grow. Does that mean he's going to spend every single dollar the Colts have in free agency? No, but I do think maybe it could lead to being a little bit more aggressive, because obviously what he has done in the past really hasn't shown to work so far.
Yeah, and so quarterback decisions, you're a Stroud guy, right?
I'm a Stroud guy. As of right now,
Okay.
I'm still diving through the film, and I probably will flip-flop, but as of right now, I think CJ Stroud's the best fit for the Colts.
I am too. I go back and forth on my preferences right now. I think my two most favored would be CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson, because now that you know who your head coach is, Anthony Richardson is a quarterback who probably needs someone like Steichen. It makes him sound so juvenile almost, which isn't the case. I just think, I don't know, when you have a guy with that many just like athletic gifts, you just want a top flight teacher for them to get the most out of them. And I think that's probably the case with Richardson and Steichen, but CJ Stroud as well, because CJ Stroud is the most adaptable to any scheme, I think. Decent size, decent arm, accuracy, he can move around. So he's one you can plug in anywhere, and I think will give you quality play. Gardner Minshew and Isaac Samola are guys I had on there as well, former Eagles. Andre Dillard, the left tackle, coming up as well.
That's a great fit.
I've been saying that, sure, you can have Bernard Ryman be the starting left tackle going in, but he needs quality pressure behind him. And Dillard's not been a full-time starter in his career, but probably still has some potential. And as a guy, a lot of us kind of telegraphed to the Colts as potentially a good fit for a Chris Ballard type back when he was coming out in the draft. So I think that's one. An underrated one that Zach and I have talked about a little bit is a blocking tight end through free agency, because you obviously have your receiving threats. You don't really want to mess with that. But an older established blocking tight end like Chris Manhertz from the Jaguars. He's like 29 or 30. Like, you know what you're going to get with him. He's not going to take up so much time from the younger guys. He's going to serve his purpose as your blocking tight end who can help in the run game. And it's a subtle move, but like we saw what it can happen when you remove a Jack Doyle from an offense. Not that he's a Jack Doyle to that caliber, but they just didn't get quality blocking from the tight end position, and it can be important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you look at it, and I think the Colts missed what Jack brought to the table in terms of run blocking and even pass blocking at times, and then what Zach Pascal brought as terms of his blocking ability. You saw just I don't know how many times where you would watch a running play get blown up, and it wasn't the offensive line. It was because guys like Mo Alley Cox would miss a block, or Kylan Granson would miss a block. That in 2020, or I'm sorry, 2021, you would see Jack Doyle make that block 9 out of 10 times, and it would spring Jonathan Taylor for a huge gain. So a blocking tight end, at least in the Frank Reich offense, it was crucial. And then you look back at what Shane Steichen was able to do with the Eagles and how Dallas Goedert, how much he had an impact. That's where you could see a Jelani Woods really take that next step and fully unlock the potential that is the athletic freak of Jelani Woods. But and again, we talk about all this, but it's definitely going to be the quarterback position that matters most. I don't need to tell you that, or the listeners that, but it's just when you're talking about what Shane Steichen said on Tuesday, what he values most in a quarterback: accuracy, decision making, the ability to create, and then above the neck, obsession with your craft. All of that just screams CJ Stroud or Bryce Young to me. And we know Chris Ballard's reservations probably on a smaller quarterback, that, and regardless of what Jim Irsay said yesterday, it just really points to the Colts targeting CJ Stroud. And it's going to be a fun debating about this for the next 2 months until the Colts make their pick on April 27th.
Yeah, some people say that was gamesmanship from Irsay, but I don't know. Whenever he speaks, he's usually good for one of the things that his GM probably doesn't want him to say, or just very flowery. So we kind of got a lot of that on Tuesday. But that's it for us, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow for more on a busy Colts offseason under new head coach Shane Steichen. Follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Andrew Moore NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Also make sure to subscribe to Locked On Colts and Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube. We've got Shot and Destin up and running now. They just streamed tonight. We're filming right now on Wednesday. They streamed live for you guys on Wednesday. This will, of course, be out Thursday morning. But they're on there now as well to join Andrew and Drake on that channel. So that's going to be on and popping very shortly. Listen to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, ratings and reviews as well. That sends us up the charts. We need it. With that said, we'll see you guys tomorrow.